Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 189 of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. And this week I have 6 new reviews just for you folks at home. And that's going to include, before I get to that, let me give a quick shout out to Mark Roberts, who recently became one of our Patreon supporters. Thank you, Mark, for being such an amazing supporter and helping to keep podcasts free of ads. Without supporters like Mark, we would not be able to do the show. So thank you, Mark. Reviews we're doing this week, though, are going to include Codename Freedom World Quest, the 3rd book in that series. Also, Blood of Fate, World 99, book number 1, LitRPG Wuxia series. Also, Illusion, the Blacklight Chronicles, book number 1. After that, also Clockwork, The Return, book number 2. And A Game of Villains, World of Karik, book number 1, Dystopian, LitRPG. And last but not least, Rule of Cool, Know Your Role. So there we go. Before we get into any of those reviews, of course, we're going to go into LitRPG news. And only a couple quick stories from LitRPG news, including some very interesting fan art here. Terry W. Irvin, author of Monsters and Maces, emailed us to let us know that he updated the cover for his book for pre-order. So we updated our review on our listing. He also wanted to share some commissioned artwork he had made for a scene from book 1 in the series. And there it is above. If you can see it, it was created by Mario A. Barraza. So thank you, Terry, for sharing this oddly accurate scene in this story. The scene does make the novel seem a little more titillating than it is, but it is accurate. So there you go. It might be a fan favorite scene though. Okay, in other LitRPG news, we have James A. Hunter interviewing Dan Prince, author of the Gravelet series. Haven't had a chance to watch it myself, but it was on the Fantasy Nation LitRPG Epic. Is the fan page there. We've only got the share. It's free to go check it out if you want to. But it's Dan Prince, good author, and James Hunter. Dan Prince just has the 2nd book come out a couple weeks ago for his 2nd book in that particular series. And James Hunter, of course, is showing off The Illumancer, who's an upcoming novel between himself and Dakota Kraut. Okay, on to stuff that is out now. I haven't had a chance to read it, but it is out. And that includes Raya, Early Game, a LitRPG Sangha, Archon's Chosen, book number 2. Also, the Khazarian Cerulean series, Cliffs of Eldamar, book number 2 is out. Gloominess, book number +2 is out. The 3rd book in the humorous Red Snatch Digital Sorcery series is out. Also, another humorous story from Robert Bevan, a short story called The Mimic's Chest from Characters and Creatures series, is out for you to enjoy. The 2nd book in the Blood of the Balance series, called Serpent and Spirit, is out as well. Some of these 2nd and 3rd out. Also, the 8th and last book in the Alpha World series, called Gamer for Love, is out, and that's doing really well. So congrats to Anna Shinofen. I'm sad to see that series end, but I know there's going to be continuation of some of those characters in another series. So look forward to seeing that. And that's it for stuff that's out now. In ebook form, we have some new LitRPG audiobooks though, including the Quizzard Mountains, Station Cores, book number 2, the 3rd book in the Greystone Chronicles, Darkness Fallen, the Wandering Inn, a wonderful story, volume 1, narrated by the amazing Andrea Parsnow, is out for you to enjoy. It's a long book. I think there's like 6 or 7 like sections that they had to download at a time to this is a long book, so just go enjoy it. Also, the 6th book in the Eden's Gate series, The Ascent, is out for you as an audiobook, as is the 4th book in the Stonehaven Link series. The 2nd book in Halocron Rising is out as an audiobook for you to enjoy. Also, the 5th book in the Good Guy series, called Dukes and Ladders by Eric Uckland, is out as an audiobook for you to enjoy. And that's it for new audiobooks. On to stuff that is upcoming in the near future, and that includes on September 17th, about 5 days from now, Bibliomancer, The Completionist Chronicles, Wolfman Warlock. And remember that this is not going to be on Kindle Limited, so you're going to have to purchase it. I already have pre-ordered it. But if you can do the authors a favor, they're trying to get pre-orders so they can get a bestseller title for this. on both Amazon and also on other programs, other e-site publishers. So definitely go check out the Facebook page for either Dakota Kraut or Moundo Press and James A. Hunter, so that you can see the details about how to support them and getting their bestseller, New York Times bestseller, and I forget the other one, a couple of different like titles that'll help them out, essentially. Okay, also out on September 19th is Skull of Atlantis, a LitRPG and Gay-Lit pirate adventure. On September the 26th, Game God of Gnomes, God Core, book number 1 from Portal Books. Looks interesting. On September the 30th, it is going to be the third book in the Shadow Sun series called Shadow Sun Rebellion. On September 30th, it'll also be Darkness Online, book number 2. September the 30th, it'll be Transformation, book number 3. Sometime in September, it'll be First Song, book number 2. On October the 1st, it'll be Frayed. This is the new cover for Monster Maces and Magics, book number 4. The second book in the Hero Online series, October the 3rd. The second book in the Varnos series, The Black Blade, will be out on October the 10th. On October the 16th, it'll be Dungeon Dive, a LitRPG short story from Tales from the Gods game. The second book in the Bad Guy book series from Eric Ogline, called Second Story Man, will be out on October the 17th. Universe ICS Keymaster, book number 2 in that series, will be out on October the 17th as well. October the 21st, Dead Man's Retinue in NPC's Path, book number 3. Reality Benders, book number 5, will be out on October the 23rd, called A Jump into the Unknown. November the 1st, A Dark Path, Grimdark LitRPG. The second book, we're reviewing the first book today. The second book in this series, which is also going to be republished, will be out on November the 4th, called Wave Deception, World of Karik, book number 2. The second book in the Intro Road Network series, called Avatar of Light, will be out on November the 7th. And another book from the same author as the other one is November 11th, 2019, The Last Time Loop, book number 1. And this is going to be it. The first time I think we're seeing this. On November the 22nd, the third book in the Dragonheart series, Bloodwell, will be out. The second book in the Underdog series, The Wastes, will be out on December 23rd. And that is it. On to new releases and reviews. And first up, it's going to be Codename Freedom World Quest, written by Apollos Thorne. This is the third book in the series. It is 690 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Limited. And here's the author's description. After dealing with the Goblin King, Lucius is unsure how to harness his unlocked power. He finds himself in a desperate race to the top as everyone scrambles to master their strange new abilities. The other players are the least of his worries. War is coming, and the trials of freedom have only just begun. So, nice short novel description. And this, again, is the last book in this current arc of the series. I talked to the author, I messaged him. He says he continues to use the Codename Freedom name, but it'll be like different subtitles. But this is definitely the end of this particular arc, and if you read the stories, you know what I'm talking about. But even though it's an end of an arc in the series, it is not a disappointment in any way, shape, or form. There is a bigger emphasis in this book in psionic training over the physical training necessarily, but you still get the physical training that you've come to love about the series, and that's definitely a highlight of this series. It's definitely like the amount of like amazing detail in combat training, in physical training, and in the way that the stats reflect that as well in this particular unique progression system. I really enjoyed it. There are, of course, a number of badass fights and adventuring in the story arc as it wraps up the multiple storylines that are resolved, including the one with the real life friend/villain, the storyline with the romantic interest. I'd say one of the few things that wasn't amazing for me was just like the mid-story villain. He wasn't my favorite, and it kind of felt like a stand-in to some degree, but other than that, like really good stuff all the way through. Again, this is a very action-oriented kind of story, which is why I enjoy it so much. And especially I enjoy the hints towards the end of the novel of like the hints of the next story arc, and I look forward to seeing where the story goes. I think it's going to get a little more confrontational with the other parties. I'm trying to spoil things. But for me, had a good time with it. I knew I would from the get-go. I've really enjoyed just about every not just about actually every single book in this series. 7.7 out of 10 for me. Codename Freedom, World Quest, the third book in the series, with a score of, again, 7.7 out of 10. Had a really good time reading it. And up next is Blood of Fate, World 99, book number 1, written by Dan Sergelinoff. It's also titled a LitRPG Wuxia series. There you go on the title. That actually has been modified. I think the last time I checked, it's just LitRPG, but we'll get into that. It is 495 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. The body of young paralyzed Luca, a boy killed by cruel bullies, becomes home to an interdimensional traveler. This is the 99th world for the traveler who has spent an entire life in each of his previous worlds. And now, he is out of lives, his previous misdeeds leaving him with a negative balance of points and preventing him from reincarnating anew. Once he realizes that he must spend his final life in a poverty-stricken family in a backward world, he awakens the consciousness of the deceased Luca and ends his own physical existence, leaving all of his abilities to his heir. One such ability is the use of the wheel. Every traveler can spend points to spin the wheel and gain a special talent, a superpower, or a deadly illness. Luca spins the wheel and gains the superpower Metamorphosis. Now he can regenerate, recover from deadly wounds, and even take on the shape of other beings. The young man takes on the form of the Emperor to avoid death, help his family, and finally, to bring order to the Empire. And that is actually a lot of spoilers in the novel description. Like genuinely, like those are really big plot points. And that is the story. There are other aspects of it that I thought I'll be talking about in the review, but that's a lot of spoilers. Full disclosure, I did receive Van's copy for review. I purchased the novel when it became available. I also noted that there are a few more than usual translation errors in the version I got. It may be because I got an early copy. I just happened to notice. Okay, I like this novel. It's nice and it's fun. It is, however, light LitRPG. There's no like heavy progression system here. It's actually even lighter than the Level Up series that the author has written, or the Discardium series from the author. It's the lightest RPG progression system. The main character, and there was a way, again, this is slightly out of date, obviously, but when it was originally published, it was called a LitRPG Wuxia series. Or Wuxia, depending on how you're pronouncing it. Just part out. But the Wuxia series, part of it is absolutely non-existent in the story. And the cover art kind of hints at it's supposed to be that. But there's no Eurasian influences in the story. There's no Wuxia. And so I'm not sure it was a marketing thing or a decision from publishers, but that doesn't exist. And the publishers have since, because of the multiple reviews saying, oh, this isn't Wuxia, have removed that part from the story. The story itself is entertaining. It starts in two parts. First, with Lucas, a boy with a severe disability who seems to live in a medieval tech civilization. He has a crappy life and can barely will himself around and is bullied. The second part starts with an interdimensional traveler that reincarnates and lives lives for fun with a game-like interface that tracks his deeds, awards currency when he gains influence, or does something that maintains universal balance, and grants skills and powers that can increase in power via a random wheel of fate. The traveler, however, is tired of his existence, especially when he's out of a currency and needs for even one more reincarnation. Instead, he transfers his interface to the body he's hosted in Lucas, who gets healed of a disability and thrust into a position where he can grow in power. Most of the novel follows Lucas, the main character, as he is betrayed by those in power, gets his revenge, and grows in strength. I actually think that portion of it that I just mentioned might have been what the publishers were looking at for the Wuxia part. But that's kind of the only thing I could have seen there. Much of the story is just seeing how messed up this part of the world is, how the main character, through events I won't spoil, tries to improve things, but has to constantly overcome obstacles in his path. Most of the obstacles are political or social in nature, but towards the end there is a little bit of fighting and action. This is an entertaining story. I did like it. Again, not Wuxia, but again, not really an issue since they stopped putting that in the title. As far as being LitRPG, absolutely is. If it is light LitRPG, again, there is the interdimensional traveler interface, which shows earned karma points called Tsoui, Tsoui, which are used to purchase spins on the Wheel of Fate, possibly getting the main character special new powers or detriments. I like the fact that there was a balance there. Those powers increase in levels as the main character uses them, thus there is a progression system. However, there are also long stretches of the story where none of that matters, none of that is actually even mentioned. And the main character himself doesn't consciously do anything to improve. It's just he's doing things, and occasionally he'll get like a notification saying, you've improved this skill, or this power has improved. It's more automatic or situational when the power itself improves him according to this situation. I'm not trying to spoil things for you guys, but it's a very interesting and nice little power. Overall, I like the story. As they do all the authors of the writings, the story is a bit darker than his other works, but it was still really fun to see where the main character came through, how he overcame all the challenges and the unforeseen consequences. It was that was probably the best part, like to see how beat down he got by everybody and all the situations and all the culture, and how he still tried to get through it. His power is a little OP, but his mentality of trying to do justice or trying to improve things was definitely one that kind of balanced that out. So for me, I'd get down with it. Not my favorite of the author's works, but still an interesting story. Again, light LitRPG though. Score of 7.3 out of 10. That's Blood of Fate, World 99, book number 1. LitRPG Wuxia series with the score of, again, 7.3 out of 10. And next we have Illusions, the Blacklight Chronicles, book number 1, written by Joseph Phelps. It is a massive 613 pages, $5 even, available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. When an overly powerful guild threatens to take over an entire server in the world's premier crime game, it falls to a new player and his small but powerful crew of friends to stop them. The Life of Crime is Blacklight Industries' second major immersive experience. Everyone played their first, the world famous fantasy game, Brescia Online. Now, years later, the company is focused on a different genre entirely. Once plugged into the game world, you feel as though you're back in the early 21st century, and thanks to their powerful immersive AI, have all the freedom to shape the world around you one could hope for. Players build crews control turf, and fight one another tooth and nail for it, rising to great power and status along the way. Each server houses a major metropolitan city, and the West Coast US server, Illusion, is being threatened with total takeover by an unscrupulous and power-hungry crew named Goonstorm. Kurt joins the game 3 years after its release, at the request of his lifelong friend Jimmy, and in response to getting kicked out of college. The pair falls in with the getaway gal, the life's most famous driver, and joins her campaign to stop Illusion's most powerful guild from taking over the server entirely. Kurt sets off on a series of elaborate and harrowing heists and guerrilla warfare action towards this goal, making powerful allies and enemies along the way. Okay, well, that's definitely a novel description. It actually hits all the main points of the story. It's a little spoilery, but it is accurate. For me, this is a LitRPG story that is part Grand Theft Auto and part heist film, and I think that those aspects are not highlighted enough in that novel description, like the over-the-top action and heist elements and escape ways are probably the thing that I think most readers were really going to enjoy about, at least the reviewers that I've read up before. The game mechanics on the show are definitely based on GTA and expanding to include those skills, levels, weaponry, rarity, hideouts, upgrades, a whole slew of like notifications that you can see in this novel is relatively crunchy. And that's throughout the entire novel. Personally, I like this story. However, the beginning of it was probably my least favorite part. A lot of the beginning portion when he's in the game at first feels very random. It feels like kind of an info dump at some point, and that's mostly just because there are so many things that have to be explained because this isn't a D&D system. Because it's based on a different game mechanics system, everything has to be explained, like stealth mechanics, the territory mechanics, the thing between guilds, how you progress, skill progression, all the stuff. So it gets a little info dumping in the beginning. But once it got past that point, once it got to the actual plotted heist, the story became more focused, and I actually enjoyed it more. It's sort of the difference between the random open world parts of GTA and the story quest. I personally always like the latter more. And again, the over-the-top action is a big part of the novel. And they're fun, but they didn't always appeal to me personally, just because I'm such a game mechanic nerd, that my brain always has to compare to what's happening here with the game mechanics that are established. And sometimes those escapes and those overtop moments, which are very fun, didn't always feel grounded in the game mechanics. For example, a lot of stuff with the main character who had just started this game, like literally the first time in the story. He has low level skills. He has no class, yet he's a perfect badass a lot of times. He shoots and it doesn't really seem to miss. He succeeds on a bunch of high end, late game difficult quests, and he's only played the game for hours or days, yet he's just always successful. You could tell some of the scenes were written more for fun than for strictly following RPG logic or game mechanics, and I'll admit the scenes are fun. However, I also want to make sure it's clear that the author goes out of his way to try, at least, to explain all the things the main character does in story with game mechanics. It's just that, for me, I'm like, he seems like he's a level 1 character, succeeding in high-end content, and that's always going to create a schism. The other members of his heist crew are all players who are high-end. They max out their skill levels. They max out their classes. They've been playing since the game started, 2 or 3 years, and yet the main character, new to the game, is as powerful as them, or more so, depending on the situation. And that always like didn't ring as true in my brain. And I know it's set up for fun, and the scenes are fun. It's just that brought down my enjoyment a little bit. Overall, though, I like the story. I like the fact that it tries to use a different game as a base system. I was never personally a huge fan of Grand Theft Auto, so it didn't resonate with me as much as it might with some other people. But I still find it entertaining. So for me, it gets a score of 7.2 out of 10. Good score, little on the lower end of my enjoyment scale there, for the good ranking of 7. But still had a good time with it. Gets a score again 7.2 out of 10 for Illusion, the Blacklight Chronicles, book number 1, with the score of again 7.2 out of 10. And next up is Clockwork, The Return, book number 2, written by Nathan Valerio. It is 267 pages, $3.50, and it's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. After the beta, the adventures of our misfortunes young hero does not end, but is only taking off. With both real life and life in the game, he takes one step at a time as he builds not only his future, but his sister's through his actions in the game world. What follows is Techno returning to a world that has begun its restoration, and his actions and reactions to the new advances of the world. There you go. That tells you virtually nothing about the story. Okay, this is the second book in the series. The first book was published, almost like 4 years ago. I liked the first book. I read it when it was originally published on the Royal Road and then went to Amazon. I liked in the original book how the main character chose the unpopular race, the Clockwork race, and while he's forced in the game, but he made it the character class and the world was very interesting, combined like a mechanical race with an interesting RPG and crafting system, and I really recall enjoying it a lot. However, things shift in book 2, and that's unfortunate. The beginning of the story is hard to follow. There's no recap, and because book 1 came out such a long time ago, it was hard for me to even remember who everybody was. And eventually, you kind of get a picture, because the author chooses to use multiple narration. Multiple narrative point of views to tell the story. Every single chapter is a different character's point of view. And so you kind of get little snippets about what their backstory is, their connection to the main character, and eventually kind of jogs your memory. But it's a challenge. And that point of view, the multiple narrative point of view thing is actually different from book 1, if I recall. I may be mistaken. I tried to go over book 1 to see if it was different, but it was mostly the main character point of view in book 1. And in book 2, I want to say the main character's point of view is the least told. There's probably about 6 or 7 different point of views that the story is told from in this novel. And that's one of the things, combined with like it feels like a new character to me in a lot of ways. Like the main character in the story is very petulant. He's very, when he feels slighted, he feels like he has to get revenge and he has to make someone pay. And it's a kind of a petty thing that made me kind of not like the character. And I just don't remember him being that way in book 1. And maybe part of this is that I have a certain nostalgia or memory for this first book, and book 2 just isn't living up to that expectation in some way. That could be part of why this novel didn't really work for me. But for me, the things I can kind of identify are the fact that one, the POV thing, change POV, that's not my thing. That really bugs me sometimes, especially when it doesn't really seem to serve any purpose. And that was kind of the case. And the main character not really being relatable and me wanting to root for him was another thing. But essentially, by the time I got to the action and dungeon diving in the story, which does happen eventually, including some crafting in there, the story had kind of lost my interest, and nothing from then on was really there to regain my interest. The main character and his crew, they get on a flying ship, and they eventually go on some adventures and some XP grinding. They kill some monsters, and there's some slight world development in introducing new races to the MMO. And there's some real life stuff that actually is pretty decent. But most of the game stuff was just, oh, he's going to go kill some stuff and gain some experience points and level up. And some of the levels that were really jumpy. And the story just didn't unfold as nicely and interestingly as book 1 did, at least for me. That's kind of what it comes down to. A lot of the adventuring in this book is summarized as well. And part of that is because it's not from the same point of view. It's from different characters' point of view. Like, oh, the main character did this, and this today, and I feel like this way, and we're gonna go do some adventuring or crafting it now, and or like some negative points of view, like different characters coming and saying, oh, I can't believe this is happening to my great people, and we're so superior, and the Clockwork people are horrible, and so a lot of the adventuring was just kind of summarized, and that didn't really work for me either. So again, this isn't a terrible story. It just wasn't interesting for me. So for me, it gets a score of 5 out of 10. Clockwork: The Return, book number 2, with a score of 5 out of 10. And next we have A Game of Villains, World of Karik, book number 1, Dystopian, LitRPG. Written by Anton Emelianov and Sergei Sabanov. This is 653 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. They lied. They lie. They will lie. This world is built on deception. Our hero entered the store that fateful evening and became involved in a life or death game arranged by a mysterious creature. He survived, but instead of being on Earth, he now appeared to be in a different world, with other people who had passed a similarly deadly test. Some made it through by using force, some by using their cunning. Everyone has their own story, but they all have one thing in common. There are no good people among them. There are no good people among them. The world of Karik turned out to be akin to a game. In it, one can level up, grow stronger, and even resurrect in case of failure. But if one makes a mistake of believing the wrong person, they will die for good. Will the magic that he needs to conceal, or maybe his patron, who seems incapable of telling the truth, help him? Who can say? Okay. It took me a little while as I was reading this story to realize I've read this story before. I went through the beginning. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But this is I feel like I've read this premise before. And as I kept reading, I was like, and I keep hitting points of like, oh no, this is definitely something I read before. And it turns out it is. This book was originally published in December 2017, and the name World of Karik: The First Player, a LitRPG series by the same authors. And you can actually see the original hardcover for this book and the second book in the series on the author's page on Amazon, Amazon's author page. And if you look on there, the first book, you can actually see our original review. And I reviewed it then, and I did enjoyed it. But the one thing that stopped it from getting a good review for me was the fact that there were many, many translation issues with that first version of this. With this re-release, those translation issues are fixed, and I'm bumping the review score essentially from 6.0 to a 7.3 out of 10. And then again, the only reason I got a 6 squared in the first place was because the translation was so challenging to get through that I couldn't recommend it to other people. And if you read those original reviews, a lot of them were the same way, saying I couldn't even get started on the story because of the translation issues. And even though I read the entire thing and I enjoyed it, my brain can tend to ignore that stuff. But I knew there was a certain level of issues that not many other people were. And I absolutely understand why the authors have changed the name of this title and the cover art, so that it's not really as associated with that original story. But it's the same story, and You just need to know that. The original review for the story, I'll read it off to you. The novel is best described as an apocalypse survival / life LitRPG. So similar stories would be the Arcane Survivalist, Life in the North, Game of the Dead, or Survival World. People are being taken from Earth by powerful beings and dropped into another planet. The planet works with RPG game rules. Each person is given one skill or ability to help them survive, and a tombstone that they can resurrect if they die. If the tombstone is destroyed, they die permanently. The main character convinces the good god of chaos to give him a mastery of magic, and thus they have an overpowered ability among all the other players in the world. While there's a way to exit, it's so difficult, no one has yet succeeded. The story is basically a slice of life power-up story. There's no huge plot. It's more about the main character learning about the rules of the world, leveling up, some betrayals that force him to power up more, and then repeating all that. There's enough variety of monsters to fight, plot twists and betrayals, and ways to power up that the story is interesting even with it being over 600 pages. The biggest drawback to the story are the translation issues, and the sheer length of the story might make it some parts feel like filler. Those two things don't ruin the story for me, but for other people it will. And again, just to be clear, the translation issue portion of the original review does not apply, but it was a part of the original review. And again, the new review score, because the translation has been improved so much, because it's actually readable now, gets a 7.3 out of 10, because I had a good time with it. The first time, I thought it was really smart. And this is kind of a darker story where there are not really any clear heroes. It's more of a villain on villain kind of story. I enjoyed it. That's again a score of 7.3 out of 10. I feel like the author just kind of got a better translation team and is re-releasing books 1 and 2 in this long, 9-book series. So hopefully book 2 will be as entertaining as book 1 was. That's The Game of Villains, World of Karik, book number 1, Dystopian LitRPG series with a score of 7.3 out of 10. Okay, next we have Rule of Cool, Know Your Role, written by Matthew Sieg. It is 529 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Ours is not to reason why. Ours is but to scorch the sky. Reyes has a problem. He's just a Gearblin. That makes him a non-participating citizen. He can't see his stats, and he can't make unopposed rolls against heroes. His life is worth less than the vendor trash he hands out chained to a desk at the worst and only arcade in town. Some say it didn't always used to be like this, but once RN Jesus left the party 1,000 years ago, the questionably blessed heroes conquered everything. But Reyes has a crush on Patch, and she's a dreamer. When she wakes up with the knowledge of an ancient fortress and a series of symbols in her brain, everything changes. Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start. The Konami code makes him a hero, which means it's time for Reyes and his mismatched crew to square off against an assembly of 15,000 new heroes and epic, crunchy, badass, mechanized carnage. There we go. That's a totally accurate description of this novel. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. I got it usually when I get advance copies, I'll try to get a day one review, and this one's about a week late. Sorry. This is a story set in an RPG world where the main character works in an arcade serving heroes as they turn in or take quests. The main character is a Gearblin or Gremlin Goblin hybrid, and Dreg, an actual faction in this world, and works as a non-participating citizen or an NPC, dealing with terribly rude and crude heroes. There are lots of pop culture references here. They're sort of explained away as having fallen through a rift into this world and being picked up by the locals. It's a thing that bugs me. I'll talk about that later. The references were immersion breaking for me, but they are funny. There was good dialogue, and I especially thought that the unique world building was really well done, creating a world from the perspective of an NPC with cultural histories of gaming events, essentially. The story has a well-explained RPG system and is constantly followed throughout the system, throughout the story rather. It even goes far as to show the math formulas for the many roles that occur, often with humorous flavor text. However, there are also moments where you can tell things are stretched a bit for the sake of humor and story. Now, I wanted to like this story. I really did. I like Matthew Sieg's writing. I enjoy all of his other series. One of the things I really enjoyed about his work is that it's always different. It's always unexpected and kind of quirky, and I like that about his stories. And this story is also unexpected and quirky, but it didn't click for me this time, and that kind of makes me sad because I like all the other stuff that he's ever written. And there are kind of two big reasons why this didn't click for me. One, the story meanders a lot. you don't really get to the plot until like you're 30% into this novel, and the first 30% just feels kind of random. And even after that plot is established, there are goals that the main character is supposed to accomplish, or goals for the story. And the story just kind of makes some weird turns, and sometimes it goes back to that goal, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes some other outside force will complete that goal. And that's kind of frustrating because it's not the main character advancing the story, it's other forces. And you can see some behind the scenes where like, oh, the story kind of has to go to a certain place, even though the main character is not going to do this and accomplish what needs to be done. It's done by outside forces, and that's a little frustrating for me. The other thing that is kind of made it not click for me is the main character. I just didn't connect with them. The cover art is very much fun and fanciful, and gives you a pretty good description of the character's personality traits. The main character, however, he's just kind of a jerk. He's mean to his friends, and while those aren't deal breaker characters critics for me, add to that kind of the dissonance in my brain caused by me expecting him to be an NPC or like a native born citizen of this world, and instead him acting like a player, like one of us, like someone from our world. Essentially, he makes a ton of pop culture references, and even though like the reason he knows those pop culture references is kind of explained and waved away, it's not really a good reason. It amounts to essentially, oh, all these memes and television and movie references comes from a rift, and that's it. It's never explained how he's consuming them, how he's learned them, how he spent his life learning these things when it would take like 30 or 40 years to get some of those references and jokes. And it just didn't feel true to me. And I get the fact that the author was going for humor here. It's just a choice that made it hard to connect to the main character, at least for me. Overall, though, those two aspects alone are kind of the reason that the story didn't land for me. I suggest that you would read a sample of the story, and if you love the humor and you actually like the main character, you're going to really enjoy the rest of the story. For me, it was just a miss this time, and that's unfortunate. For me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. That's Rule of Cool, Know Your Role, with the score of 6 out of 10. And that is it, everybody. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today and listening to me talk about this genre I love, LitRPG. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, on our webpage, and help support us in so many ways, including just if you're going to buy any of these books we're talking about, click on the links we have in our show notes. We get a couple pennies for every time you purchase a book, and those little pennies add up to dollars, and those dollars help to cover our bills and putting this podcast out. So thank you very much. And thank you for hanging out with me today. And so we can hang out again, ladies and gentlemen, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye.